We know who that is.
Okay, we'll call the order at 8:33. Motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll make that
Councilor
motion,
Warwick.
Mr. Mayor.
Delegation. Who's next gonna do that for us? Elks?
That would be me.
Oh, you're doing it, Sandra
Why do
Murphy.
you think I'm here?
Oh, I thought maybe you just come to visit.
It hurts my heart to come here. I miss you guys.
I thought maybe you just come to visit with us.
She was complaining how early it was.
Yes. You always do that. The early morning person is gone. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Sandra Murphy.
My name is Sandra Murphy, for those who don't know me. I'm a member of the Hanna Elks Lodge number 451. I'm here today to present to council a snapshot of what impact our lodge has had on this community. The Hanna Elks in 2025 recorded 11,350 hours of volunteering. This was accomplished by providing breakfast fundraisers, running the bar at events, running barbecue fundraisers, assisting at the biannual rummage sale. I'm still recovering from that one. Doing the highway cleanup project as well as many others. Community project donations were $16,163, which was in turn funded to the Hanna Swimming Pool, the Hanna Pioneer Museum, the Curling Rink, the Food Bank, the Hanna Legion, just to name a few. Local sponsorship donations of $5,500 went to the junior golf program, the Hanna Minor Hockey, the Fall Fair, Hanna Girl Guides, and 4-H. On your handout that you received this morning, you can see that from 1999 to 2025, the Hanna Elks have donated over 50,000 hours to this community. Total money donated in that period is $323,728 to worthy causes and projects within the local community and surrounding areas. At present, the Hanna Lodge 451 has 50 members, and we are working on the Hanna Provincial Conference, which is being held here in Hanna in June of this year. At that conference, our very own Councillor Vernon Thoreau will be named the new provincial president. So congratulations to Councillor Thoreau for that honor. In closing, our conference committee would like to ask the mayor and councillors if they would be willing to donate 130 Nickelback t-shirts to be included in our swag bag given out to each Elks member attending the conference. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I'll let you decide on the shirts. I asked on behalf of her. Thank you.
Okay, we're not done with you yet. Any questions for Sandra?
Sir?
If we have questions, now you have to go back over there.
I don't answer questions.
You're a presenter, not
Yes, my dear.
Mr. Mayor, I guess this goes back to the town. Sorry, I guess my question is, do we have Nickelback t-shirts available at the town office here? And in that quantity, like 130 possible? Oh, okay, I was not aware of that.
And
So now
sort
that
of
I'm aware
size,
that,
I
okay,
presume
thank
they
you.
don't all have the same size.
They're very close
they're-
to all the same size. So their last tour, they reached out and had some swag left over that they were willing to donate for the cost of shipping. And they, their promotion company worked with us to allow us to pay to have Hanna Home and Nickelback on them, otherwise it was going to come.
So are you,
Point, so
Nickelback did this?
they donated the
Wow.
shirts. We just had to, from the previous concert, we just had to pay to, or tour, not concert.
Wow.
We just had to pay to ship them and to have the design that we wanted to put on. So in cooperation with the band and the team, we do have a good number of them and we have been donating them. People usually just come to the office, send us an email, not to ask specifically for Nickelback shirts. They ask for swag and we usually handle that internally.
Well, thank you. I just got educated. I did not know. I had no idea. Wow, thank you, Nickelback, number one, for donating those. That was great. But yeah, okay. Makes our decision. Probably easier, yeah.
I think we can cover that for you, Senator.
But I didn't know either.
What?
What is the
Any
average
other
size of the average
questions?
home?
No, have fun with your conference and,
Over president.
congratulations on Mr. Thorough being the Royal Exalted Grand Poobah, as I like to call him, from my Flintstone days, so.
I got the hat.
Yeah, thank
just-
you.
You just need the little propeller on top.
Oh, Santa left, but thank you to the Elks for your contribution to community.
Yeah.
I mean, I never realized either to see the numbers before us and the volunteer hours. I knew you guys were available in the community, but that's, pretty astounding. So,
All right, next on the agenda is Ascend. See this guy before somewhere.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Rohan Sethi. I am the audit partner for the Town of Hanna audit this year, taking over from Peter Stone. So I'll be going through and taking you guys through the financial statement journey here for 2025.
Yay.
In front of you is the audit package. I'll get you guys to flip a few pages to page number 1. Page numbers are at the bottom right of each of the page. So first page there is just outlining management's responsibility with the audit. So management is responsible for the financial statements. We come in and we audit the numbers. We do work with management on a few adjustments. However, the final say is management say, and the responsibility for the financial statement is management. So that letter just outlines that responsibility there. On page 2 is our independent audit opinion. That's basically where we provide our opinion on the audited financial statements for the year 2025. It is a unqualified, unmodified opinion, which means it is a clean audit opinion for Town of Hanna for 2025. Also on that page are some additional responsibilities for management, as well as those charged with governance, which is the council, as well as the auditors at the bottom there. And goes on to the next page there. So I'll go to page number 4. Page number 4 is the financial position for the town. This is where you're going to see your assets, your liabilities, both financial and non-financial. And I'll go through some of the numbers here in detail and provide you some background there. So we'll start off with cash, which is at the top. Cash position was at $5.1 million compared to 4.8 last year. That's about a $379,000 increase. I'm going to give a little bit more detail on how that money moved from a financial position on the statement of cash flows on note 2. So I'll go into detail there at that point, but cash did go up by almost $380,000 this year. Then we have our receivables. So this is where you'll see your property taxes, the money received from receivable from the government. And so overall, there was a decrease of about $218,000 in total receivables. So we had receivables outstanding last year compared to this year. We were collected $218,000 more by the end of the year.
I'm just curious, can we ask questions along the way here, or do you want
Absolutely.
to just do, because I'm just wondering why our cash is the increase. Can we identify what that was from? Was that from?
I'm gonna go through it on the
Okay,
statement of
fine.
cash flows.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Then we have land inventory held for resale. That went down about $39,000 there. That's basically because there were two units or 2 lots, actually 3 in total, that got sold during the year. So that's where that decrease is coming from there. Investments, we ended up with 2.3 million, just shy $27,000 lower than where it was last year. And that's basically because there were some investments, term investments that were not reinvested. So that's about 300,000, which you'll see come back in cash. That was not reinvested. So there were investments in government bonds. So that went up by 280,000. But then there were some GICs that were not renewed. So that was a decrease of 300,000 in investments. But it stayed pretty consistent year over year. So just about $27,000 decrease there. So total financial assets moved by about 95,000, so $95,000 increase there compared to prior year. We're gonna move on to liability. So next item there is accounts payable. There is a $151,000 increase in payables compared to last year. And payables stayed pretty consistent in terms of the operations. It's just a timing difference of some of the payments that got made in January, February of 2026 that were outstanding in 2025. So it's just mainly a timing difference as to why that number went up. Those payments, about 151 got cleared in the month of January and February. So brought it back to the consistent levels that the town usually has. Next item is deferred revenue. So this one is essentially, we ended up at 1.85 compared to 1.5 million last year. So about a $271,000 increase, which also relates to the increase in cash that you'll see later on. And what this account is basically is these are fundings that were received by the town, recognized and realized in the year, and whatever is left over for future purposes. So there's about $271,000 in excess that was received this year, which is gonna go on for future use for the town. Employee benefit obligations, that's basically your vacation accruals, your pension, your sick leave realization. So that's about $10,000 increase there at $281,000 for the year. And then we have asset retirement obligations. So this is your obligation for the asbestos as well as the lagoon reclamation. The increase here is primarily due to accretion for these expenses. So as the date gets closer to realize the reclamation, the expense gets increased each year, just so that you know exactly what your cost is. I will touch base on this in more detail later on in my presentation, but something to note for the council later on there. So overall net financial liabilities were at 3.8 million compared to 3.3. So that's about almost a $500,000 increase in liabilities. And so your net financial asset actually decreased this year by about $400,000, sitting at 6.7 compared to 7.1 last year. And then just a little bit on the bottom, that's your non-financial assets. So your tangible capital assets, which I'll provide more detail on Schedule 2. That increased by $1.5 million. And then we have land inventory. So this is mainly the 605 Palliser Trail property that we had. And we had to take an impairment on that this year, about $700,000, just given the fact that the carrying value of that property was higher, and we did get an offer during the year, which was considerably lower. So we had to adjust the price of that on the books accordingly. So accumulated surplus at the bottom there, it's 44,000 or 44,595,000 versus 44,200,000. So net increase in accumulated surplus of about $395,000. On page 5, we have the statement of operations, basically where you'll see your revenue, your expenses, how money was used and spent throughout the year. So compared to budget, we were fairly consistent. We were a bit by about $50,000 in total revenue, so $8.5 million versus $8.518 budgeted. And we were higher of about $690,000 compared to last year in total revenue. Big contributing factors for revenue are the net municipal taxes, user fees, government transfers for operating, and then there was some decrease in investment income. That's just because not the same amount of money was reinvested, so there was just a little bit less interest income that was earned in the year. On the expense side, we were higher, about 1.7 million compared to the budget. So we landed at $9.5 million compared to 7.7 that was budgeted. And we were higher compared to higher compared to last year as well, $1.5 million. And we were at 7.9 last year. Lastly, at the bottom there, we have government transfers to capital. So there was about $1.3 million that was transferred for capital from the government. So we have excess of revenue over expenses for about 395,111. And then we see the accumulated surplus there at the bottom again. So these are the couple numbers that we're gonna keep seeing throughout my presentation is 395, as well as the $44.5 million. On page 6 is another outlook on your net financial assets. So over here, we basically take your excess over revenue, so that's the $395,000 number. And then we adjust for any non-financial items, so basically anything related to tangible capital assets, impairment on the land held for resale, prepaid, so on and so forth. So that's where the adjustments that you see there. There are about $3 million that was added to tangible capital assets, so we have to adjust that out. Amortization on those assets, and then we have the impairment on the land. So overall, that's where the decrease in net financial assets come from, $401,000. That's basically what it accounted for. On page 7, this is where
I
you
think
have
your pages are,
oh, are they?
I think your 7 is our 8. No?
No,
What?
that's
What?
on there.
So 7 was the one I thought we just discussed. Like is this 7 or 8?
That's 8,
It's,
That would be 8.
that's 8, yeah.
It's early.
That's my 7.
That's his 7 and our 8, so I was right, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, we
That's
had
my
it right.
7.
Yeah,
So that's your 8?
yeah, that's my 8.
Okay.
Because I
I'll
noticed the
go-
last one you said 6, but it
I'll
was
go.
7, so.
Okay. I'll go according to that.
No
Sorry.
worries, no worries.
Okay, page 8. We have our statement of cash flows. So this is where we're gonna see cash movement throughout the operations. So we start off with that $395,000 excess of revenue over expenses. And then we adjust for any non-cash items. So anything that was an expense that the town didn't have to pay cash for, we have to adjust for that. So amortization is one of them, gains on disposal of capital assets, the accretion on your ARO, as well as the impairment on land inventory. So we adjust for those items, so we end up with $2.6 million there. What I want to highlight is the number in the middle of your page there, the $3.3 million. That's basically your net cash inflow from operations, right? So town's operation itself brought in $3.3 million throughout the year through its operations. And then that cash was then used for other items such as capital and investing. So there was acquisition of tangible capital assets. So there was about $3 million that was used there. We did get some cash for proceeds on disposal of the assets, about $60,000 that came through. And then there was some changes in investing on the investment side. So about $27,000 that were not reinvested that I mentioned before. So there was a net impact of a $27,000 increase. And then there was some movement between restricted cash and unrestricted cash. So that's about $575,000. So overall, the change in cash is in total $955,379 is related to operating side, and the rest is the restriction side. Okay. Page 9. 9? Okay, all right, okay, I got it. I'm on the same one now, okay. On page 9, we have the accumulated surplus. So another outlook on how the accumulated surplus was allocated throughout the unrestricted, restricted, and tangible capital asset sections. So we see that $395,000 number there again, and then the accumulated surplus of 44.5 at the bottom. And throughout the sheet, it just shows how the funds move between each of the categories. So about 850,000 was moved from unrestricted to restricted surplus. Then about 140 was moved back for operational use. Then there was about 752,000 that was used from restricted for tangible capital assets. Then there was about 2.2 million that was used from unrestricted to purchase those tangible capital assets as well. And then we have our amortization as well as our accretion on asset retirement obligation going to tangible capital assets. On page 10, that is the outlook for the tangible capital assets divided into different classes. So you'll see overall net book value in tangible capital assets was 37.6 million compared to 36.1 last year. And that's primarily due to additions, about $3 million in engineer, 2.2 million in engineers. There was construction for the bridge. Then there was also some stuff done to the arena with the roof, some flooring, some community center LED lighting that goes under the building section. And then there was some purchases of machinery and equipment for about 495,000. And then just the one truck in the vehicles for 63. So all additions, that's where that 3 million comes from, divided through the different classes that we have. And then at the bottom there, you'll see the relative amortization that or depreciation taken on those assets for the year. So that was about $1.5 million. That's where that number comes from. So that's where we end up with a net book value of tangible capital assets of $37.6 million there at the bottom right. On page 11, we have two schedules. So the first schedule, Schedule 3, that's the schedule for the property taxes. So total taxation was about $3.8 million. And then we have our requisitions of about 914,000 on it. So net municipal taxes there is $2.9 million for the year. On Schedule 4, that's where we see the movement in, or basically the difference in the transfer from government, so separated by operations as well as capital. So about $1.6 million was received for operations, and then about 1.3 was received for capital spending. Page 12, same numbers on the expenses, $9.5 million, just showing that by object. Here you'll see where the primary expenses were. So, $2.2 million was on salaries and wages. That's pretty consistent with where we usually would see. Contracted and general services, $2.4 million. So there was an increase there compared to last year. Material goods and supplies, that stayed pretty consistent compared to last year. And then we have the amortization of $1.5 million. So the main reason between the budgeted amount and the actual amount is primarily due to the amortization that was not included in the budget. That's usually something that comes on at the end of the audit. So that's where that difference was coming in. So if we adjust for that difference, we're fairly consistent with the budget and the expenses for the year. Okay. On Schedule 6, that's basically the segmented disclosures. Another look on the statement of operations that we saw before, just by segments for the town. Again, at the bottom right, you'll see that $395,000 number. That's the net revenue over expenses. But then it divides it by the other different segments that we have. So general government mainly has the primary excess of 3.7 million. And then we see how the other segments use the bring in the revenue and use up the expenses for the year to come to that 395,000. So the biggest is recreation and culture. It's shortfall 1.3 million. And then we have protected services. That was a shortfall of 500,000. And then transportation at 439. So it kind of nets off with the excess of revenue that the general government had for the year. Page 14, now we get into the notes of the financial statements. So this is basically the first couple of notes are the accounting policies that are available or we use at the town. So no changes to these accounting policies. This is how the numbers that came about that we just went through, these are how they're accounted for in the books. No changes were made to these accounting policies for the year. So I'm just gonna move on to page number 18. I gotta check myself mentally.
This
number. Yes, you got it, 18. So That page has, so it ends that first note on the significant uncommon policies and it goes into the cash and receivable note. Cash note just gives you a little bit more information as to what was included in the cash number. So 240,000 of the funding is not available for general use in the town. And then the rest is basically the money sitting in the account is earning an interest of 1.9% in the general bank account. So that's money not invested in the investments or GSC. That's just income being earned on the operational account. Then we have our receivables. So it gives you a little bit more breakdown as to where the receivables are coming from. 185,000 is from property taxes, and then 2.8 is from other, which is all the provincial, other levels of government grants, GST, receivable there. And at the bottom, it gives you a little bit more detail on which different types of funds have that receivable or grants have that receivable. Next page, page 19, we have investments. So it just gives you a bit more detail on where the money's been invested. So primarily money's been invested in government bonds, and then about 120,000 been invested in GIC. So that's where we see last year was 427, this year is 120. So 300,000 that was not reinvested in the current year. That just got used up in the operation sitting in the cash account. Note number 5, that provides you a little bit more detail on the deferred revenue. So like I mentioned, we were at $1.5 million in deferred revenue at the beginning of the year. We received close to $1.7 million in additional funding, and we used 1.4 of that funding during the year. So we're left off with $1.8 million to use for future use. And at the bottom of that table, and it goes on to the next page, that's basically the different grants and funding agreements that areas that you received the funding from. Note 6 just gives you a little bit more detail on the employee benefit obligations. Like I said, those are just the vacation payable, sick leave that's vested, and then the bank payables that increased by 10,000 a year. Page 21, note 7, that's the asset retirement obligation. So that gives you 2 obligations that the town has. So the asbestos abatement as well as the lagoon reclamation. Asbestos abatement is estimated to should be completed around the year 2033 and 2043. So estimated cost at that time was about $1.6 million. Of that, we have accrued a liability of 690 in the current year. And then for lagoon, it's estimated to be reclaimed for the year 2043, and the estimated cost at that time is to be $1.5 million. Something I want to touch base on in my audit finding letters on this piece. Of that 1.5, we've accrued 623 for this year's purpose. So as we get closer to the year 2043, the number for the lagoon reclamation is going to look more like $1.5 million. Okay, page 22 gives you your accumulated surplus just by different outlooks. So again, unrestricted surplus versus what are some of the internal restricted items. And then what are some of the items that are capitally restricted? So again, accumulated surplus at the bottom still the same for 44.5 million compared to 44.2, and that increase is basically your excess of revenue over expenditures of 395 there. Yeah. Page 23 provides you with the debt limit. So Alberta regulations has sets the debt limit as well as the service limits on it. So town has no debt, but what that table just says is it is under the regulation can take up to $12.8 million worth of debt and still be in compliance with that. So no debt for the purposes of this year's financial statements. On page 24, we have the salaries and benefits. So that's just a note disclosure that the regulation requires us to have. So it has all the salaries and benefits for the counselors as well as the administration on that table. And then we have the pension plan. So the LAPP, there's about 219 $16,000 at the end of this year. And this just discloses the LAPP section for the town. Page 25, we have the commitments. So there's about 3 commitments that the town has at the end of December 31st, 2025. One is with Palliser Regional Municipal Service. And the other one is for the Marigold Library System, as well as there's lease payments with Quadrant Rent for certain equipment. And that just gives you an outlook of the next 5 years of lease payments that are due for that lease. Perfect. So that's basically, and then on the next page is your budget data. So that references back to the statement of operations and subsequent events. There were none to report after December 31st. So nothing major to report for the purposes of financial statements that are up to today. Any questions? I know I kind of went through the notes, but
Can you give us a summary? Where are we at?
I will, and then I have a few points that I want to make on the next.
So on page 11 with the net taxes, does that include the requisitions?
Yes,
Or-
so the top portion of it, first half of the table there, 3.8 million.
Yep.
That doesn't include the requisitions. Doesn't.
Okay.
The requisitions are right below it.
Perfect, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to.
Yeah.
Wrap my little noodle
Yeah,
around.
3.8 is without the requisitions, and then I think 914 was the requisition amount. Yeah. Okay.
Councilor Warwick, you're smiling.
Well, I had the same question I was gonna ask. Should we spend more, save more, tax more? I wanna have professional
Yes.
opinion of the whole scope of things as well. So to me, the town appears to be in good standing. We don't have a bunch of debt.
Yeah.
We haven't taken on a bunch of debt load.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so if I go through the financials, what I usually look at, just to kind of give you guys an outlook of when I'm reviewing the statements, there's a couple things that tell the viability of an organization in general, right? I'm kind of giving you an outlook of that. First statement I look at is the cash flows. So that essentially tells me, is the operations bringing enough cash flow to sustain its obligations, right? So that number that I mentioned, $3.3 million on the statement of cash flows for operation, that's a key number. Basically, is the operation generating enough cash so that you're able to pay off your liabilities? If that number is in a deficit or is negative, so you're spending more than you're bringing in, then what I would usually see is that you'll get debt to pay for that. And that's where the investing side or the capital side will come in, right? So the investing side, you're gonna go to the bank and you say, I don't have enough money, so I'm gonna get from the bank and pay for my obligations. So none of that's present for the town's financial statements. At the end of the day, it was a surplus. So at the end of the day, the excess of revenue was still higher than it's not a shortfall. So the one thing I do want to mention is on our communication tab, and this is where it might answer your question if you want to spend more or not. I'll tell you one of the main things that you should consider. I think this is definitely something that the town should consider, and a common finding that we're finding is it's actually in your communication tab. So if you guys flip over there, there's a letter. That letter is essentially our audit finding letter. So this is where we communicate to the council as if we found anything or if there's something for you guys to know. One matter there is around the asset retirement obligation, right? So as I mentioned, those numbers are considerably large, and right now they're a big estimate. To support that estimate, we don't actually have good backing, right? So we've had verbal discussions with a consultant on what that estimation or what that cost is gonna be. We don't have a concrete management expert estimate on those reclamation costs. The asbestos is not that big of a concern because you can actually find relative pricing online, and that's supported by management on their estimate. It's the lagoon that I'm more worried about that doesn't have a good support to the estimated number. So that 1.5 that I mentioned, that might come about in 2056. It could be more like 3 million or 4 million. We just don't know, right? We've only had discussions with the expert as to what it might be. They haven't really done a full assessment on that value. So when I look at it from an audit perspective, it is at the end of the day a management estimate. At the very least, we did have a consult with an expert, so that's something that provides me a little bit of comfort when I'm looking at it. What we end up doing is sensitivity analysis around that discussion that was had with the consultant.
Well, with the price of construction, I mean, I've been in this chair now for 5 years, and the bridge project, when I first came into the chair, it was 1.2 million, and 4 years later was 1.7 million.
Yeah.
So that 1.5 million, I'm not to be that guy, but it's not.
No, exactly. That's exactly it. And then that's where the expert's gonna provide that opinion as well, right? The other thing that I've noticed with Lagoon is we don't know the depth. So people look at it from a surface perspective, okay, yeah, this is what it is. They can actually figure out the depth and see when that actually comes, how much surface area are we dealing with to reclaim, right? So it's important to have that. The thing is, if we don't have it for audit purposes, it becomes harder for us to get appropriate evidence on that number. And as the year goes by, that number is going to get bigger and bigger, which is going to be more risk for our financial statements. And the standard is actually asking us to start qualifying opinions if we don't have support, right? So to answer your question there, it's, if you were looking, that's an area that I was investing just for the peace of mind and having that background as to what that number looks like. Yeah, and it's not just a one-time thing that you do it once and then maybe in 5 years or 6 years, you do a sense check, right? Are we still in the ballpark? You don't have to redo it every 5 years. You just do a sense check, call the same engineer in and be like, hey, you guys did this assessment. Can you do like a, follow-up for that? So.
And can we identify, I guess this, maybe I can ask our town staff, where the asbestos lies, like what facilities, where, I didn't realize the abatement on the asbestos was so big. Where, what are we looking at for that?
Transportation, the public workshop will be one, the Parks and Rec shop will be one, the arena will be one, the community center will be one, the library will be one. What else we have?
Anything that was before 85.
Yeah, basically anything that was built pre-1985.
Yeah.
And so I guess we need a contingent plan, just to, we're working on that on a yearly basis. We do so much then. I'm not understanding that, so that's interesting.
We just have to, the government is mandating we have funds in place to deal with it when it happens. There's too many places that aren't prepared to take that burden on when it happens, and then all of a sudden there's panic. So they're being proactive, I guess would be the term I want to use, to make sure that we are in good shape and can deal with it if we have to.
So it remains, we're not disturbing it, we're not doing anything to it until such a time that the bill has become too dilapidated, or we have fire or something like that. Is that correct then?
Yeah, as an
Is that what I'm
example,
hearing?
where the Dollarama is,
Yeah,
there was some asbestos abatement done in there.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Just on the next page there's a couple items. These are just small identification of things that we noticed on a few samples that we had. So that's at the bottom there, A and B, timesheet approval, journal entry approval. There were just a few instances where we couldn't really find evidence of review. And I had that discussion with Matt and Winona as well, just to kind of have the signatures and review marks so that we can evidence those as part of our audit. It's not on every sample, like it was just a few that we identified, so we just wanted to bring that up so that we can have more control and overview some of those items that impact the financial statement, so. I do have one other matter to discuss, which is also in your books there. If you flip over 2 more pages from that, you'll see a PowerPoint slide like this. Danny's already seen one.
Yeah.
But this is just my spiel. This is changes that are coming from the accounting side, so I just want to get the council aware, make the council aware of it, so that's not a surprise when you guys do see some of the changes. So what's happening is the public sector of accounting standards, they've changed, or they're adding new wording to their standards. So there were 2 chapters that related to the accounting standard, and they've expanded it to 10, right? So they did quite a bit of work on updating these. So on that first slide, it shows you what are some of the new things that are being added. What are some of the things that were already there, but they've improved and added more wording on, and some of the things that were similar. And over the next few pages, I've kind of only included the things that you guys are gonna see on the statements itself, so the changes that you guys are gonna see on when I'm presenting this. And by the way, this is effective year ends that start April 1st, 2026. So you won't see this in 2026 financials, but you'll see these in the 2027 financials, okay? So the next page, which is 1.2, that gives you an outline of what currently is the reporting model on the left side, and then the new reporting model right beside it. So statement of financial position, that's where your assets and your liabilities are. That doesn't change. We currently don't have any statements, but there will be another statement for net financial asset and net financial liability. Statement of operations stays the same, so that's the revenue and expenses, so that doesn't change. And then we remove a few statements, which is the net debt, remeasurement, gain and loss, and then we compile them in one and we report them as a new statement. That's the change there on the face. What they're also gonna do is with the statement of financial position where your assets and liabilities sit, they currently have financial assets, financial liabilities, non-financial assets at the bottom. They're just gonna lump them together. So assets will remain together, liabilities will remain together, and then you'll have your accumulated surplus. So just a little bit of a reorg that they're gonna do on the face of the financials, and adding those new categories up top. And then the other change they're gonna have is basically on the statement of operations. So you're gonna start seeing a note disclosure at the bottom of the statement of operations, which will have your budgeted amounts on there. So if a budget was prepared, so you currently have a budget column on those, but they want a statement made from management to say if there was a budget, was the budget approved? Right, so we don't audit the budget, but we do include it for users to see where we were from, where things were budgeted, but they wanna have a disclosure at the bottom saying if there was a budget, was it approved? If there was a budget, if it was not approved, and then if there was a budget and approved, you state that at the bottom. So a little bit more accountability is what the whole expansion is about. Your accountability on the statements from management, from us, from a disclosure perspective, and then from council members to know what the statements include. So those are the main changes that, you know, from a surface perspective that you guys are gonna see on the 2027 statements. There's obviously things that will change internally, how things are measured, and then that's something that I'll work with management and come up with a game plan. So we do have a year and a half to figure that out, but we're just getting into it now. So we're releasing that for us now. And that's basically, that's it. Any questions?
So overall, where do you see us? Really good, middle, or are we?
Well, I think it was pretty consistent compared to last year, right? So operations are pretty consistent. The one thing where the numbers might not look as big as last year you got capital funding, significant capital funding in 2024. This year you still got capital funding, just not as high.
Right, makes the numbers a little harder to follow when you get that big cash injection and then try to follow it all the way through so.
That's right. Yeah, so that's why you kind of
Yeah.
saw a little bit of a dip, but that's because of the capital funding that got received, so. But overall, like I said, as long as your operations are in the positives, that's a good sign. When you go into that shortfall, it's not a bad thing to go into shortfall. That means like, depending on what you spend it on, if you're adding new infrastructure and you have to incur some costs in 1 year, that's why you have reserves.
Yeah.
Right, so it's not completely a bad thing if you do go into the negative, it's just depending on what you spend it on. Yeah. Right.
So should we be getting into this like our debt limit? Should we be dipping into that and doing some infrastructure?
I mean, not necessarily. I would say try to see if you can get capital funding through the grants, right? Try to maximize that. And if you see any restrictions or any pushback on that side, and you do need to do the capital spending on infrastructure, that's when I would consider debt. I wouldn't look at debt at the first instrument right away, just because you do have some reserves. You do have grants, community grants, your CCBF or LGGF. Yeah, I mix those two up all the time. But I would access those first before I go into grant funding or debt funding.
So in terms of an austerity point of view, with respect to expenses in the budget, is there somewhere that we need to look at? That perhaps we are overspending or is this in line with what you see in other budgets in terms of the amount of revenue received?
The common trend I see is we're always a little bit over budget on expenses, right?
Okay.
And then I look at where were we from a revenue standpoint? Were we also over budget on the revenue standpoint and consistent? The statement of operations, like I mentioned, the budget here, the 7.7 doesn't include the amortization, right? So that's your depreciation on assets. That's a non-cash expense. That's just an expense. So if you take $1.5 million out of the 9.5 you spent this year, that's about $8 million in expenses, and you guys budgeted 7.7. So fairly consistent with where the budget was. So money was spent where it was intended to in the year. So that's kind of how I would look at it. If revenue went down, expenses went up, that would be another indication that I'd be like, hey, well, why did we spend more and we didn't make more, right?
Everybody's a little bit more alert after some of the things that happened to some of the other municipalities. So I understand everybody's paying more attention with urgency.
Yeah, I'd say in that sense, to be honest, a measure should be taken a look at from a control perspective, right? Not saying that there's any deficiencies at the town at this moment, but it doesn't hurt to, reevaluate, okay, what type of controls do we have? Do we have enough? Do we have it in the right spot? So that in the future, the opportunity is not there for something like that to happen.
So with every community in Alberta, every community in Canada for that matter, infrastructure is aging. So we do have some reserves. My theory is we'll leave the reserves and increase taxation to get those projects done. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if there's an appetite for the increase in the community, I would say that would be the first way.
Okay.
Don't use the reserves for, I would say, don't you have the reserves for certain restrictions, so have a plan for the reserves, but not necessarily the first place you go to for revitalization. You're right, look at increasing revenue as long as there's appetite for that increase in the community. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna streamline a question to that then. So we have no debt. A lot of communities have taken on a lot of debt. So we have no debt. We've never taken any on. So would that be a consideration? I mean, we do have some underlying infrastructure that is in dire straits. Do we leave that until it gets, explosive and we have, significant problems there? Or do we take on some debt load? I know we compare that to, our reserves, how much we have in reserves. But, I mean, I have this philosophy too, today's dollars on today's citizens.
Mhm.
You know, stockpiling a whole bunch of money that today's citizens have, you know, contributed to in taxes and contributions to society, and we just stockpile all those and never spend them. And yet we look at our underground infrastructure and it's dilapidating greatly. I mean, where do we find the balance? Do we take on debt? The town of Hanna doesn't have any debt. We're not, you know, subject to any debt right now. So with the minimal amount of interest we pay, is it wise for us to kind of take on some debt load to, you know, maybe do some of that infrastructure that needs to be done today?
Are you saying versus increased taxes?
Yeah, not increasing taxes.
Yeah.
I don't think that's, to me, it's not fair and reasonable. You know, I can't justify that to my public, that, you know, I'm sitting on this much in reserves, we have no debt load, and yet I want to do a significant increase in taxes. I do not feel like that is a fair adjustment. I cannot, like I said, I cannot justify that to my public as a, you know, as a one that is the person that makes these financial decisions.
Yeah, so I'll actually bring you back to the cash flow. So there was about $1 million in excess cash this year. So the question of debt it's a tricky one, and obviously I can't give you financial advice because I'm the auditor, but I'll give you my perspective on it. Debt is good if it's used efficiently, right? And if that's the last source that you can do. If you don't have enough cash being generated from operations, then you're going to be looking at debt. My thing would be, why are we looking at debt if we have cash inflows, right? If we have cash increases, let's use those first rather than paying the interest on the debt, right? Now, if there's a purpose for that cash, so that 955, there was restrictions and things like that, that's a different story. That's for future projects as well. So that's the same idea. So you're using that money for future projects. If there's no cash left over outside of that, then I would look at that or taxes, right? If that's not the appetite, debt would be my next thing. But just be mindful that, you know, debt has a servicing cost, so there's interest. As long as we are allocating some of that towards some of the excess towards the debt servicing, that would be my my advice there. That debt servicing note that you see, that's basically the maximum debt the town can take based on the Alberta regulation. Right, so I think that's note 12, if I'm not mistaken. Note 12. So that's basically the total amount of debt that the town can take. So $12.8 million based on the total revenue that you receive. So note 12. So it's on page 23. But that doesn't mean that, you know, take on that much debt, obviously. But that's under regulation, that town will still stay compliant with overall regulation to pay it somehow. That's right.
Well, and the
Yeah.
servicing,
And the
the load on
Yeah.
that debt would be significant.
That's right. Yes, but not a bad option if that's, you know, if it's used for the right purpose.
Right.
Yeah. That's used to pay for expenses that are not, you know, if you're paying for expenses, that might not be the best use, but if you're paying for infrastructure, for in the long run, it might be a good use of funds.
Well, in reality, it doesn't matter what we put into reserves. If we have to build a new arena or facility, we are not having that. We cannot, in my projection, I cannot see when you can get that amount of money into reserves to rebuild those facilities. I mean, almost have to deal with those with grant funding and all the rest. I mean, there's a lot of outreach that needs to happen when you are looking at those kind of, you know, rebuilds. But yeah, so to me, I'm just trying to figure out what is fair and reasonable to accumulate in reserves versus what we're spending and maybe taking on that, you know, a bit of debt to.
And to add to that, in terms of reserves, we need to have targets, I would think. We can't just have reserves for the sake of reserves.
Yeah.
We need to have targets. We need to have, what goals are we trying to achieve here?
Well, I think
Is
when you
that-
have declining infrastructure.
Yeah, well, we
I mean,
do,
there's
but
so
what's the
many
target?
long-term goals. I mean, how many years until we need to redo our arena?
Yeah,
How many years?
Well, our arena's actually 6 years overdue.
Correct.
When it was built 1980 with a 40-year life expectancy. We're at 2026, so we're 6 years overdue. The biggest thing with reserves, and I understand what you're saying about targets and things, but it's hard to say we're gonna have $10 million for arena replacement. We're gonna have $10 million for a curling rink replacement. We're gonna have $10 million for equipment replacement. And then all of a sudden, the line from Sheerness to town blows up.
Absolutely.
But so we can't put that money in one pot and say that's only for that. We're not gonna use it anywhere else. That's with our reserves that are, we don't have to ear tag them. We need to be flexible with them so that if we do
And that's
have,
why I said targets.
yeah. But like I said, we just have to make sure that we have money that we can.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some flexibility, obviously. Because if we're in a situation like the city of Calgary, obviously we have to address that immediately.
Well, and yeah, and it's not only city of Calgary, it's everywhere.
But
It's
I
one
think what
example.
we've got in reserves isn't enough to
No,
do nothing, you know, so I mean,
if we spent every dollar of our reserves, we might be able to do approximately 7 blocks of infrastructure. That's every dollar we have.
But we have no debt. We can't take loans. There's other municipalities that have taken great loans. I mean, if the need was there.
The debt also is somebody else paying that bill. That is our children paying that bill.
Correct.
And I do not want to have my children pay a bill that I can pay. That is called being an adult. That is a policy around my house. I do not pass on a bill to my children. That is mine. And we have times coming where there are some big bills that are going to be coming. We have to figure out, are we going to pay our bills or try to get somebody else to pay them? And we're running out of other payers really quick because those grants are not coming anymore.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm assuming we need a motion, Nobi?
Oh, I would have a motion to accept this under business.
Okay,
So we just
Yeah.
do a motion to thank. Like,
yeah, thanks once again for coming, and we're all on the same page now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Hanna.
Yeah.
Each house is still sitting empty. Do you have a home in Hanna?
Yeah, I just reviewed because that's new. It's just.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
I don't think they're gonna see you again this year.
Thanks, guys.
Just
Bye.
that's all.
Yeah. Well, it's good information. Public presentations? She's shaking her head before I even get it out there, so.
Do you have your budget ready for this one?
Okay, moving on to 5.01, send audited financial statement. Motion to accept as presented. Council Kroll, all in favor, and carried. Actual Sentinel light conversion, want to speak about that?
Yeah, through the chair of the council, ATCO got in touch with me and said that when they made that list for us the last time and we agreed to do it, they missed like 6 lights. So they want just to get, again, council approval to add those to it. I guess they're called Sentinel lights. So yeah, just the recommendation is just to do convert the remaining 3 to the investment. Yeah, to the investment, right?
Yeah.
I'll make motion that we accept Apple's proposal.
Motion, Councillor Thurl to accept proposal. Discussion. All in favor? Carried. Town of Mundare, Alberta Munis resolution. Matthew?
Yeah, through the chair of the council, Tenemonder CAO got in touch with me. They want to make a resolution at AB Municipal Convention They're concerned that when police are collecting fines, they don't share those fines with the municipality. They would like to put a resolution that AV Munis, goes into this to push for this to happen, that they share some of the revenue that is collected by the police with the municipalities. I think they're looking at 18% of fines and 30% of the municipal portion by 2030.
We already did a portion, correct?
We do, I'm not sure what it's based on though.
Okay,
It's always just been, they just send us money every month and it goes up and down. Well, it depends on the
Yeah.
fines, so I have no idea whether they're in-town fines or whether they are, we used to get a list before and now we don't.
So they're trying to get a set fee, correct? So that was trying, is
set
that,
percentage,
no, sorry, I'm sorry, but they're trying to get a set percentage in place.
which is in place now, which is, that's where I'm confused as to what the percentage is now versus what they're looking
Well,
for.
if they gave examples though, it would be a significant increase
Yeah.
back to the municipality based on their example.
Ultimately, we are paying for that service and we're gonna pay more for that service.
You take more from them and they're gonna charge you more.
I think it's reasonable and fair to support
Mhm.
this, and then we can make the adjustment. I don't know what, I thought it was 2%, but I read it somewhere at one point, I don't know what it is either now. That was my question, like, are we making $1,000 a month, 6,000, 10? But I think it'd be fair and reasonable to support the motion, and then make the adjustments of what that may look like within the motion at the time, because it's gonna go through your review and all the rest of it. So, I'd be willing to support that motion. Support Mundare to put.
Yeah.
Motion to support motion?
Motion to support the
Well, we'd be
letter.
the second.
We'd be the seconder on that
Yes.
motion.
Yeah.
I shall second that
Yeah.
motion.
And so,
Don't have-
so we can move it forward.
Yeah.
Did you not say we need a seconder?
Oh, no,
And the
they're
floor.
needing a seconder at 8.
Oh, I
So
see.
ABBs, they're gonna present the motion, and then we'll have to.
We'll have to get up to
second.
speak to
Yeah.
it.
So our mayor will have to present himself and,
Start thumping
then
the
speak
table,
to the
baby.
motion.
What are you giggling about over there? I like presenting about as much as you do.
Take Martha with you.
So I'll make the motion to.
Okay, so we have a motion
Support
to
Mundare
support
in
Mundare on
presenting
their
at Alberta Munis.
resolution. All in favor?
Yeah.
Carried. HR policy procedure, HR policy approval.
Yeah, again, through the chair of the council, a while ago, staff thought we could review this policy and update it ourselves. We soon found that it was like mission impossible. There was a lot of regulations and to be compliant with that. So we reached out to AV Munis and contracted the company through them. And we had several meetings with them. They went over it pretty much line by line, getting feedback and making sure that our HR policy was compliant. You can see in the report there where we updated items. So, you know, we're happy with it. We've reviewed it since it was written for us. We are compliant where we weren't compliant before. So, we're just looking for council to approve our new HR policy.
Was the original 175 pages long?
Well, yeah, we just did, Big Country Race, HR. And, there's a company in town here that. And, we got, it's all in place now and everything's gonna.
There's lots of, I don't even know what you wanna call it.
What grader is worse.
Well, yeah, and the days of someone quitting or being fired, and how you do it, how you go about it, and what can happen and what can't happen have changed immensely. Like it's, well, as an example, when most of us were younger, you went to work for a company, you worked for them forever. And now it's, 5, 6, 3, 2, and they move on. So it's just, time has evolved and we need to be up to speed on it, so.
My first thought, I read through the entire document and I found a lot of narrative in it. A lot of discussion pieces that might be subject to interpretation. It's certainly a different type of document than a collective agreement in
Yeah.
terms of a union. It's very different in its content and its structure. And again, that I see a lot of interpretation in this document that could create some headaches for administration.
Potentially, like I said, we thought that we could do this, but again, it was beyond us, so that's why we went through AV Munis so that we would have the expert that could do this for us, so we're relying on their expertise.
The whole thing is I looked at it and we go once a month through this stuff at work. And it is great, you know, I see, as long as you got the policies.
Yeah.
And procedures,
Ready and you follow it.
but the whole thing is, in some of the places, it should be put into the handbook where the policy and procedures are, you know, but that's something that a guy can work. And this is, it's a live document, it's another one that has to be worked on constantly. It's not,
Pity, because legislation changes as well.
but it's a
Do
great.
employees sign this?
Yeah, there is a place on the sign, so we're gonna set up, if it's approved, we will set up like meetings with each department and go through the HR and get them to sign up.
So it will be a consent document then on their part? They will sign the consent to all the,
Yeah,
requirements of
they'll
the
have to sign
policy?
it. I don't know what we can do if they refuse to sign it, but, yeah, we will
What's our
definitely.
policy say on that?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because there is some sections, you know, that we notice that like we have to do, it's like every 2 years, we have to have a driver's abstract. And it's a thing that you should have because it shows if,
That they have a license.
yeah, but it's an insurance thing because somebody might have severe driving issues, you know, but it's good for you to know. But it's nothing there to discipline on, but it's something there for insurance to look at. Yeah.
I just was curious as well, in terms of the professional development piece, is there a cap on professional development for each employee?
Yeah, it would be within our budget and what yeah. But our biggest thing with that is making sure that we have letters that if we're gonna pay for people's training, that they're gonna stick around.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, I
And
saw
then
that,
if
yeah.
they leave, yeah, so.
So each employee, for example, doesn't have like a $2,000 budget.
Is it just like as needed, like if there's an area that somebody needs improvement on or a little extra training, is that when you would set something up?
Requested in the budget, future budget, yeah.
But each employee, like if you needed training tomorrow, you couldn't get that because we'd have to request in your future budget?
Above and beyond, there should be a
Yeah, like
funding
there's a
already.
dollar amount that we have set aside for training in each department. So
Okay.
if nobody takes training this year, then, you know, that money just sat there. But if 3 people wanted to go and do something, then yes, that money is there.
Or you might forego a conference, this conference to do this training.
So do you guys use it though, if you see like staff members that need additional training and certain things, if they're struggling, is that an option?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be down to the director.
Yeah.
But there is a budget.
Yeah, there is a budget, yeah.
Okay. Not necessarily for each individual.
But each department.
Right.
Okay.
need a motion.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we accept the HR policy as presented.
All in favor? Carried. Minimum property tax implementation.
Here's that word again.
Through the chair of the council, we've discussed this in the past, so as we're coming up to time to set our tax rate and budget, final budget, thought we'd bring this for you to get your approval or not. There's a minimum tax that exists in a lot of municipalities where there's a minimum fee that you would pay, and it helps equalize out, like every property gets the same kind of service levels, the roads, sewers, sidewalks, the infrastructure. So to set a minimum amount that people pay is seen as a fair tax on people. So did some comparison of local and close by municipalities of what they have set their minimum tax rate at. And you can see from Drumheller at 260 to Sedgwick at 1,065, Dealey at 900, Warren at 800. Raymond kind of varies, but around 1,200. Lloyd at 1,000. So they all set this minimum tax. You will see from the attachment 2, you will see that some people pay roughly $15 a year in property taxes, a lot around 200 to 300. So, there's one at 479. So some are going to see a drastic increase if they pay the minimum tax, and some are going to see a minor increase if they pay the minimum tax as well. And this just applies to commercial and non-residential land.
Matthew, does, an empty lot, do they pay water and sewer?
They would pay the
Yes.
flat.
The flat fee or whatever?
Water, sewer, garbage.
If there's a service there,
If there's not,
if there's not a service there, if it was an older lot that there's no service, then there's no utility to it. But if there's, an empty lot, if I take down a house, then yes, those utility invoices are still produced by the flat rate.
I'm fine with the flat rate. I think it's reasonable.
You said that's for commercial and non-residential only?
Oh, residential and non-residential.
Pardon?
Okay.
So wait, which is it?
Residential and non-residential
Yeah, it's
properties.
up there.
That's all we can apply to.
It's surprising to me that this particular one, is this correct that they only, the $1.75 is all they paid to hold a piece of property or residential?
I think it's a very small piece of
Very
property.
tiny piece of property.
It's probably one that they might want to consider amalgamating if it's next to their
Yeah.
property.
I see. Yeah, because that seemed like,
Yeah,
I'm like,
I know.
it costs more in our
It
paperwork
does.
Yeah.
than what we're getting for, that transaction to happen. Seems crazy.
But the cost to amalgamate that piece of property would be substantial.
And are we in control of those costs? That's not, it's out of our, yeah, it's very
But I
unfortunate.
was-
Yeah.
You have a number that you'd like to use, Matthew?
I think 500 is a good place to start off with because it's new. You don't want to go into like Iron or the other places kind of levels that are close to 1,000. I think 500 and there is numbers where on the bottom of that chart how much it impacts our budget with extra revenue. If you scroll to the bottom.
It's around 21.
Yeah, it's an increase of $21,000.
would that go into general revenue?
So which one's closest to us in population?
Three Hills.
Three Hills would be the closest, yeah.
And they're quite a bit higher.
Yeah, like they're- What if we just did what Three Hills does and we did 450?
That's up to council to decide. Like where you want it would adjust those numbers, because you can see that there's people paying 460, 470 on there. So
Okay, I mean, I'm okay with the 500, I'm not sure.
500 is,
I'm not sure.
I've got one of those properties around that list, so I'm
Yeah.
okay with it. Actually, I have two properties. on that
Well,
list.
there's lots of
There's a dollar
properties,
75
four
one.
sixty-six.
You know, like my son's $1.75.
Yeah.
No, that used to be a border copy.
It is increased in most.
Yeah. I'm sure my neighbor.
Especially
Probably 15. I think.
Okay, so motion to go to $500 for a minimum tax. Council Kroll, all in favor? Carried. Spring budget adjustments, Matthew.
yeah, through the charter council, this is the good one here. So we,
The good one.
Winona's been busy like a bee making adjustments to the budget since we last discussed it. She could probably go into it in more detail than us. We got our assessments are up. As you can see in the chart, they went up from, from 15, they went up 15 million. There was an increase. And non-residential increased slightly as well. So there's an increase in that which can offset any potential tax rate increase as well. But there was also some increase in fees that we didn't take into account the last time we discussed budget, so there's some changes to that as well. And Winona's planned some potential tax rates and what kind of revenue we could get. We left tax rates the same. You can see that because the assessments went up, there'll be an increase in revenue as well in both residential and non-residential. Winona can probably go into more detail.
Council Warwick.
I would place a motion on the table that we maintain tax rates due to, the assessment increase at $15 million, that we maintain, the 2025 tax rate for residential and non-residential.
I probably want to add one other thing. There's one topic I want to discuss in closed session that could also impact the overall budget. So you might want to have this discussion, then go to closed session and then make your decision on this as well.
Yes, certainly.
So I'll let the motion float.
With the increase in assessment of 15 million for residential, leaving the tax rate as it is now, everyone's taxes will increase by a percentage of, anywhere from 4 to 8%.
Yeah, it's
a lot.
it's a
was-
hit.
It was very difficult to, try to come up with a tax rate, with the assessment being so high for residential and commercial not. Commercial only went up 1.93 million in assessment, where residential was 15 million.
Yeah.
So it was, I not played with numbers, but added and subtracted tax rate mills, and it was very difficult to reduce some, to increase some for an overall value. So it was,
So we might want to do a negative, we might want to do a decrease in taxes
Well,
after we come out
oh
of.
gosh,
right, and we can talk about it.
Okay, after we come out.
What created such an increase in terms of assessment?
They just,
Housing prices are up.
yeah,
Is that what their
Significantly.
justification was?
okay, and
Yeah, it's more.
current market value as of December 31st last year, or July, sorry. And, a lot went from, 20,000 to 40 or $45,000.
I anticipated that's what it was, but I wanted just verification of that. I don't make the assumption.
Yeah, no, our bottom end has jumped up significantly, like, there is no such a thing as a $30,000 house in town anymore right now. Our top end has not increased at the same rate, but it has increased. Like I would say we're probably back pre-COVID pricing. Just not at mine shutdown pricing, but we are up. So.
Well, there's also the supply and demand, and we
Yeah.
have a demand for these houses.
Yeah, houses don't stay on, like, it's weird. We don't have a bunch of my observation. We don't have a bunch in that 120 to 200
Not at
range.
all.
It's this or this.
It's wild.
Yeah, so I mean, the wife and I got done doing something. We went for a drive and drove around town to see what houses were for sale, what houses had sold, and there's not a lot in that middle bracket. There's like lots at the top and, well, not lots, there's a few at the top and a few lots at the bottom, but. Okay. Spend a fortune.
Okay.
All right, so, council roundtable, anything to add?
Back to the discussion that we had with, Ascend here, like when they were talking the sewer lagoon, okay, when they were talking about the estimate that we have, can you walk me through what that estimate was? Like, is that just a, back of a napkin assessment? Like, do we even have a sweet clue of what may be coming up bill-wise?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically a reclamation of the lagoon, so what they based it off of other areas that have done lagoon reclamation. And my concern with their number is, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, as I said, with the bridge, 1.2 to 1.7 in 5 years. The lagoon reclamation, I anticipate will increase on an annual basis at approximately $10,000 to $15,000.
Well, it would be the rate of inflation, would it not?
Yeah.
So are we gonna get somebody qualified to, like a third party qualified person, like you had suggested, to do an assessment?
They suggested MPE.
Yeah,
Did they? Okay, perfect.
MPU doing the lagoon study right now, so I'm
Are they?
sure we can add to
Perfect.
that, so, yeah.
I mean, just to the fact that if we can get more of a consistent price that we need to be preparing for,
Yeah.
versus, okay, that's all I was just wondering, because I mean, I hear the number, but I just have no idea.
Where the number came from.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, MP is doing a lagoon survey, is right now, so,
Summer stones.
yeah.
Those are Parks and Recs.
And it's going to collect the data that Ascend recommended, and,
Not as, yeah, but we can add that to it.
okay, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, but it will probably come with a cost, so we will have to come to council with the unbudgeted cost request.
Well, that's preventatively, we know.
Yeah, and the
What we're
discussion
looking at.
that we had with Ascend yesterday, they recommend we do this before the next audit.
On the note of MPE, using words of a former CEO we had, we should probably have some shovel-ready projects in the event that there is some government grants available, so that we can, when there is some funding available, we could be first to the trough, for lack of a better term, and say, we have these projects ready to go. I do know that it is a cost, but I also think that if we are ready when they are, instead of going, well, we have to get it engineered, and we have to do this and this and this, so I would like to see us prioritize and get a couple of shovel-ready projects.
And as I alluded to that earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, just, we need to get, I think we need to, gotta be ready.
Yeah, we need,
Yeah, that's
we
right.
need some targets, like what are we, what's the
Okay.
priorities here?
That's infrastructure that we need.
Yeah, infrastructure is such a magical thing,
Well,
Councilor
it's such a
Cole.
big word.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
well, and and that's the thing, when you're
Well,
talking,
let's do it all.
yeah, well, what was that, we had a gentleman come in a couple years ago, and I believe we were $330 million behind in our infrastructure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds
We'll
right.
already see that.
Yeah, oh no,
We're never catching up.
we will be, you're absolutely right, Councilor Warwick, but it was just such an astronomical number when they throw that out there. And when I say we need to upgrade and continue to maintain, I think we have some momentum now with what we've done with Pioneer Palliser and the
Yeah.
bridge and the downtown infrastructure. I think we have an appetite, as long as we can continue to show that we are progressing, it's rather than we're not hitting the ground running. So
Well, I
I,
think we need to be proactive rather than reactive.
yeah, and
We always
most
can.
everybody that I've talked to when I ran for this position, I said my platform is to increase taxes and continue to do upgrades on infrastructure. And everybody laughs at me and goes, that is not how you get reelected, Danny. And I go, well, I realize that, but that's what my goal is.
I
So-
think, Mr. Mayor, I understand Brent some time ago, did a bit of a presentation to us, and there was some, some underground infrastructure on a few streets in town here that were in dire needs.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to, have a focus on that, and maybe in the next while, really look into what it's gonna cost and really fix, I mean, when you have larger pipes going into smaller pipes, it could cause some, problems in the near future. I think it's time for us to really look at that
Well, and
seriously dilapidated.
Yeah, and we've
street
got some
construction.
trouble points that we know of already.
Yes,
So I think if Matthew and Brent can get together and give us a list of their priorities, not ours, I think that's a good step forward, so.
But I think our priorities, if I can just add one thing.
Yep.
I think the priorities have to reflect absolutely the basic needs of our community. For example, if we've got some issues around water infrastructure,
Yes.
versus the arena, I think it's, in my view, quite clear what we need to focus on.
Yeah. Oh, what was it that, at the last, AB Venus conference, what our minister said? Fix your pipes, fix your water, fix your sewer, that's your priority, here's your marching orders.
Yeah.
Well, it is. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Martha, we're going into a closed session. Sorry, you had your chance. I think I'm gonna drag you with me to music.
I'll make.
Motion to move into closed session. Councilor Rohrbach.